Hello and welcome to the Cordius 1.0 video tutorial. Cordius is a free open source program to help you create chord diagrams for stringed musical instruments, fretted stringed musical instruments like a guitar, ukulele, or mandolin. Cordius is available for Windows, Linux, and Mac at chordious.com, which is a link in the description. So, really quickly, this is what Cordius looks like when you first open it up. Obviously, if you're on Windows or Mac, some of the styling will be a little bit different. This is currently being recorded on Ubuntu, but more or less, this is what you're going to get when you launch Cordius. So, we're going to start with arguably the first feature most people are going to want to play with, which is the chord finder. So, go ahead and click on the chord finder here, and you see we have a nice window that opens up. Got to make this bigger. So, this part of Cordius helps you find chords for your stringed instrument. So, there's a lot of chord finder apps out there, and this is what's built into Cordius. Now, the way it works is it's not using a database of chords like a lot of programs are. What it's actually doing is it uses the number of strings and the tuning to figure out, with music theory, where in the definitions of the chords, where those chords actually lie on the instrument. So, as you can see here, it started up, and the first instrument chosen is the banjo in open G tuning with the C major chord. So we look here, we will see a bunch of C major chords. Generally speaking, the top part here is where this is where you're going to choose your instrument tuning, the note you want, and the quality of the chord. There are several instruments built into Cordius, and the instruments have several different tunings, including usually the standard and some alternate tunings. There are obviously way more tunings for stringed instruments than I could enter all in, not knowing what people actually want to use. So if you can't find your tuning, go ahead and send me an email, and I'll try to get in the next version of Cordius, or you can look on Cordius.com under the frequently asked questions page, and there's instructions for how to add tunings yourself. It's a little bit advanced, but if you can't find your instrument in this list, or if you look around at the other instruments, as long as it has the same tuning and the same number of strings, if you can't find another match to let you find your chord diagrams, then that's an option. So like I said, here's the top. You pick the kind of chords you want. So I have, right now, I guess, I can go pick, say, ukulele in standard C6 tuning. These are the C major chords. Over here on the left are all your various search parameters. Like I said, Cordius doesn't have a database of chords. It actually tries to find them on the fretboard. And so over here you can fine-tune exactly what you're searching for. And it has some, what I think are good defaults, but you're welcome to change them if you're, what kind of chords you're looking for are different requirements. So really quickly on the side here, first off we have the number of frets that you're going to see in the diagram. So as you can see, there are 5 frets on each of these diagrams. The max fret is how far down, or how far up the fretboard you want to go. Obviously after the 12th fret, chords start to repeat themselves, so by default the max fret is set to 12. But if you decide you want to look at some chords that actually span over the 12th fret, you can increase that number. Or if you want to stop seeing chords from so high up the neck, you can reduce this number. As you can see, now only seeing C chords that go up to the 6th fret is a lot less results. So let's put that back up a little bit. The next option here is your max reach, and that's basically the span of how many frets you have to finger to make the chord shape. So the default is 4. I think it's a reasonable number. Obviously, if you have problems stretching your fingers on the fretboard, maybe you want to decrease that, so I set it to 2. And now I'm only going to see chords that span over 2 frets, not including open strings. And obviously I can increase that if, for example, I have a really good reach, a really big hand, so I can actually reach some of these wider chords. Now, important thing to note is because Cordius is just finding notes that make a valid chord, there's no guarantee that any one of these is going to sound particularly good or particularly nice or be that easy to play. It's not, you might find chord shapes that aren't traditionally played for your particular instrument, but that doesn't mean they're not valid. Got a few more options here. We have whether or not to add bars automatically. As you can see, there are no bars currently on these diagrams, but and that's a style decision. I mean, we'll get to that later when we start talking about the style of these chords. Right now, the default style doesn't show bar lines, so this is just kind of there for later, and we'll see it in a minute. Then we have adding and allowing open strings, so I can turn that off if I only want to see closed form or movable chord shapes. You can turn off open strings, and the same thing with muted strings. So I personally don't like playing a lot of chords with muted strings, but if you wanted to, you can. If you want to, you could turn that off. And right now I can just see all of the movable chord shapes. The last couple options, we have allowing rootless chords. So for an example of, say, a D 7th chord, looking at the D7, these are the D7. You might, a closed form shape. This is the, a D7 on a ukulele. But a lot of times you'll see that, especially with instruments that have less strings, and when you have chord qualities that require more notes than there are strings, sometimes you have to drop a couple notes to still kind of make that chord. It happens a lot of jazz chords and stuff, so we can do that by allowing rootless chords. So you can see here now we have a new D7 that only has these 2 notes. It's actually missing the D note in the chord, but that's okay because, it sounds close enough to a D7. So this is an example of, if you're not seeing chord shapes you might be used to playing, it's possible that you've been playing a chord shape that's missing the root or missing some other notes, and so you can go ahead and check that to get those loosen up the search results and find those extra possible chord shapes. And then the last option here is to mirror results. So if you're somebody who plays left-handed or plays and strings in the opposite order, good or bad, I don't have an opinion either way of whether or not you do that, but this lets you mirror the chord shapes. So as another option for people who is basically tuning in the opposite direction. So that's pretty much it for the chord finder. It's fun to kind of play around and find chords that you didn't necessarily know were available to you. The other thing that it does here is by default, every time you notice when we change something, the entire page refreshes with the results. But in the case that, I'm on a very nice computer here, if you happen to be on a computer that's maybe not so fast, or when you do these actual changes and you notice that it's taking a long time for the search results to come back, you can turn off auto refresh at any time and then do manual by clicking on find chords. So this is the chord finder, and this alone is a great thing to play around with to find chords for your favorite instruments. But now we're going to get into the real reason why Cordius was made and why I made Cordius, and that was to make these professional looking diagrams. So you can see here these look very nice and clean and sharp with the marks on them, and wouldn't it be nice if there was a program that made it easy for you to make your own custom chord charts that you could include in your own song sheets or songbooks or educational materials or what have you. So what we're going to do here is we're going to save off some of these chords so that we can play with them. So first I'm going to pick C. I'm trying to auto refresh again. So let's get since we're already on the ukulele, minor, major, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to take, I'm not going to mirror them anymore. Alright, so I'm going to take this chord and save it. And then I'm going to go, now I want to change the note to F, and I'm going to, Let's save this one. And then I'm going to go to G. G7. Okay. We're going to add that as well. So we say, okay, well, where do those get saved? When we close the chord finder and go back to the main program, you will see now that we have 3 lines appearing in this left-hand portion. This left-hand portion of the program is called the chord document, and you can see right now it's currently untitled. We haven't saved it yet, and we have those 3 diagrams that we found earlier in the chord finder. Okay, so I'm going to save this really quick. I'm just going to save this, and all I'm saving is a text file. So this text file contains the instructions for Cordius to draw these 3 chord shapes. And if you look over here on the side, what you'll see is all of the elements that go into drawing this chord shape. So we have a C chord selected. Right here we have the title. I can change this to, I can type in whatever I want here. That's what the title appears. File name, we'll get to in a second. File name is what the name of the file is when we save these images off. When we export these images from the program. The option is here so that if, for example, you saved a bunch of C chords, you can give each one a different file name so they don't overwrite one another. Then we have the number of strings. Obviously, in the case of the ukulele, we have 4, but if I wanted to, I could add more strings, right? There's no reason why I couldn't, change this, repurpose this shape and use it to, say, create a chord shape for a guitar, if I didn't already have one. Then we have the number of frets that are shown, which we saw earlier. And you can see I can do that. 6, 7, 8. It's all up to personal preference. So default is 5 there. The baseline is the number that has to do with the top of the chord diagram. So by default, the 0 will show this kind of thicker line representing the nut on most stringed instruments, or the 0 fret. Putting it to 1, you can get rid of the line, and then you can start counting up the fret number here on the side, right? So I could put that to 3 or 2, let's say, and if I decreased, I can. So basically, you could put that way. You could put the number here if you have a fret that's higher up on the fretboard. Another thing we have here is we have, again, this bar. It's currently set to -1. This bar is where you want to draw a bar line. Like I said before, the default is not to draw bar lines at all, and we'll get into that in a second on how to actually change the style. And of course, the last thing here are the placement of all the marks on the diagram. So if you see, I can adjust the number and thereby change where this chord or those marks are. Okay, so let's say I go here, I'm going to take away the file name. Alright, so I've changed it. Go to change to another chord, and it asks me if I want to save it. So we have this save button over here. I'm just going to hit save right now, but as you can see we have a save button here. I'm going to go ahead and remove these file names because I only have a C, an F, and a G, so they don't really need special file names. It'll just use whatever the title is. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Obviously, if I click on one and do that, if I hit revert, it will undo the changes that I made. So save and revert are probably the most common things we use, but when you're clicking off the diagram, Cordius is smart enough to make sure you save your changes. So we've made those changes there. Let me save the document really quick. Okay, so we have C, F, and G. So let's say I want to change the style. Well, the first thing we need to recognize is that we have 3 entries here and the order matters. The way the chord document works is it's being read from top to bottom, and by default we'll draw whatever chord diagrams it sees, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a style line or an options line, which will basically let us change what the next shapes are going to look like. So if I go over here and hit new options, here we have the kind of, parameters you'd expect to see for drawing this. So we have the width and the height in pixels. We have the stroke width, which is the thickness of the lines. We have the margin, which is the space between the edge of the image and the diagram. You have the font size, which is the size of the font, of course. The font family is the name of the font. As you can see, I have a bunch of fonts on my computer. The list you see will depend on what fonts you have installed on your computer. The style, bold, italics, and then the other important thing here is the bar style and open string type. We'll get into bar style again. We'll save that for last because it's kind of the most complicated thing to have to work with Cordius. But here we have the open string type. So by default, it's set to none. If you wanted to, you can set it to circle. And so we're going to see what this does really quickly here. So I've added a new line, and you can see on our chord document on the side, it adds this great big bunch of lines that has all those numbers that we just saw lined up. And if we go back and look at our chords, we'll notice that, well, nothing really changed. So, the reason for this is because, like I said, we read the document from top to bottom. So the style was last, so the style is not applied to these chords. So if I want the style to apply, this option to apply to these chords, I have to move it up. So that's why we have these arrows here. And move it up to the top. Now that it's at the top, we'll see, we'll go to F. Hey, look, the part of the style we changed to put circles above the open strings is now being applied. So let's go back to the style, and we're going to do edit line to open that style back up. And let's change some other things. Like let's make the width 200, and maybe the height 300. And let's make the lines a little thicker, give a little more margin. Let's change the font to everybody's favorite font, Comic Sans. Let's make it bold and italic, and hit OK. Now we go look at our diagrams. Hey, look, see, F and G, but the font's changed, the lines are thicker, the shape of the chord has changed, the diagram dimensions have changed. So that's how you can change the style. And so what happens is the general procedure you're going to follow is you're going to add chords, and you're going to want to put a chord options, an options line here at the top of your list to specify what you want those chords to look like. And when you're ready, I can save this document. We're going to go up to here to export, and here's where you're going to pick what kind of image files you actually want to create. And export will create images for all the images that are in your document. So let's start off and make some JPEGs. Everyone knows JPEGs, and we're going to save those out there. And if I come over here really quickly to that folder and open these up, well, there you go. We have our diagrams C, F, and G 7 as JPEGs. And you can take these JPEGs, let me give them full size, and you can put them in whatever you want. That's an important note that I should make with Cordius, is that any chord diagrams you make are yours to do with however you please. You can put them on your sheets for your own songbooks. You're free to put them on song sheets that you hand out at, say your ukulele club or at a jam session. You can even put them in a book that you write and publish and make money on. I don't care. The diagrams you make are yours. I've had people ask me, how much do they owe me to make copies of things, and that's not the point. I've made Cordius as a kind of giving back project. So this is meant for educators. This is meant for people who need an easier way than using Paint or a traditional drawing program to make these diagrams. There are already plenty of books out there with chords in them, but sometimes, especially if you play a different tuning than everyone else, or you have different fingerings that you like to use, or substitutions, or what have you, it can be nice to make your own chord diagrams, and this program is all about enabling people to make the chord diagrams that they want to use. So, that little rant out of the way. So we have CF and G, and as JPEGs, your two other options are PNGs and SVGs. So I'm going to really quickly export as PNGs to that same folder. And then I'm also going to export as SVGs. So I can do a quick comparison. You can see what they look like differently, and kind of the pros and cons of each. All right, so here is C as a JPEG. Here is C as a PNG. And here is C as an SVG. Now, let me get them all. Okay, so they're all the same size. They all look the same, pretty much. You'll notice that, of course, with PNGs and SVGs, one benefit you have over JPEGs is you have transparency. So if you put this on your website and you have a different color background, you can use PNGs as a way of letting the background show through, or if you're putting it on colored paper or what have you. Obviously, if you do want that white box around it, you're free to use the JPEGs. So that's one immediate difference you can see, obviously, is you have transparencies with PNG and SVG. So if you need that, those are probably the formats you're going to want to look at using. The other thing is something that everyone knows who uses any type of image format, so deals with any kind of images on their computer, is zooming. If we look here, we zoomed in at, what are we at, 600, let's go to 800%. And we look at that, and well, it's blurry. There's artifact, and you can see all the little artifacts in there. It's not very clean when you blow up this image that you made. Now, you could go back into Cordius and change the height and width and resize everything and make it even bigger. But let's say you don't. Let's say you just use the sizes. You created it small, and now you want to blow it up. If we take the PNG and we zoom in, also to 800%, you can do side-by-side comparison and go, hey, look, it's still blurry, but it's a little bit cleaner. You don't see all these weird little gray artifacts in the center of these marks. So PNG is a little bit better for zooming in, and PNG also has a benefit of taking up less space than JPEGs, but they're pretty small images anyway. It's not too much to worry about. So if we have those two, why do we have SVGs? What is an SVG image, and how is it involved? There's a detailed description on Cordius.com, the frequently asked questions. Why are we using SVG images at all? Because people have hardly heard of them. But if you've never used one before, you can see right away some differences. The main one being, look how crisp and clean that stays. Look at all the lines. Look at the marks. Compare them to the other image formats. Because essentially the way the SVG image works is, instead of remembering the image that you have to zoom in on, and it has to kind of fill in the blanks, that's why it gets all blurry, SVG images basically save the instructions. And as we can see, if you wanted to break down what a chord diagram is, or what this chord diagram is, it's basically there's a C on top in Comic Sans, and we have a box here, and we have some lines on that box, and we have some circles. And so an SVG image just saves, hey, draw a box with lines and circles. And so if you zoom in, it'll say, okay, draw a bigger box with lines and circles. It redraws it every time. And so because of that, it can draw it crisp at whatever size. That makes SVG images great for creating an image that you want to then blow up and put on, say, a poster, right? You can use a document with a bunch of SVG images in it, and when you stretch that document from a piece of paper to the size of a poster, the images will still look beautiful and clean and will print much nicer. So there's more information on the Cordius website and the frequently asked questions about how SVGs work. And but generally speaking, here are your three options. JPEGs give you an image format that everybody recognizes, but you can't really zoom in without it looking ugly. PNGs look a little bit better zoomed in, and you also get transparency. And SVGs look crisp and clean, and you can zoom in as far as you want with transparency. The disadvantage, of course, is that not every program recognizes it. You can copy and paste these into Office documents, no problem. Web browsers recognize them fine, but if you have some image editor to open it up in, they might not recognize SVG format. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so we have all these diagrams. I'm going to close all these up and go back to Cordius. So, you have all these diagrams. If you want to remove chords from your chord document, you have delete line here. If you want to find more chords, obviously the chord finder is right here. You can pop in and search for more chords. You don't have to keep all of your chords. You know, you can organize them any way you want. If you want to have ukulele and banjo chords together, that's fine. It's up to you. It's really just a list of drawings here on the side. You can put in guitar. Took a second there. Like there are a bunch of C major chords on the guitar. You can also save those, and you can see they're using the exact same styling that you set in your document, right? You can see what they look like. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and add those to your, you save selected, and when I close it out, look, now we have that new C diagram added. Okay. The other way you can add chords is if like, well, I have a chord that doesn't show up in the chord finder, but I know what it looks like. You can always just do new chord here, which will create a brand new chord diagram that you can edit, to your heart's content. If you notice, it defaults here to a C major on an ukulele chord. That's just with the default of the program. I'm an ukulele player, so a lot of the defaults I set to ukulele things, but there's no reason why you couldn't say, you know what, I like that better. And you can use this default button here to say, hey, you know what, this is what the default, I want new chords to look like. So it'll say yes, you want to set this as your default, you go yes, and so now whenever you do new chord, you can see they all have the same default of this. So we have these, you have a list of chords. The next thing we're going to talk about, before we get back to bars, I don't think I've forgotten about how barring works, but the next thing we're going to talk about is comments. Comment lines are essentially a way in programming for a person the programmer, to leave notes about a program for themselves or for future programmers to read. It's generally there to help, document how the code works, so that when you look at it later, and it's been months since you've looked at it, you remember why you did things the way you did. So, in that same respect, you can add comment lines to Cordius. You just hit new comment over here, and this pops up, and I can say, ukulele chords. And in that way, I can go ahead and stick that and put that at the top there, let's say. So I'm saying, hey, these are all ukulele chords. Then I might say, you know what? I have these, I don't want these anymore. Yes, delete the line. Yes, delete the line. Yes, delete that line. And go, yeah, I have this guitar chord that I put in there. Maybe I should put a comment to, nope, that's not what I wanted. Maybe, I'll get to that in a second as well. Go to new comment, and I'll say, guitar chords, whatever. And I'll move that up before it. So now when I'm reading through it top to bottom, I'll know that, okay, the ukulele chords were here and the guitar chords were here. And you can use comments to help organize it. You could also put them in separate documents, your lines. It's all up to you. I personally find it very easy to, create a bunch of chords for a particular instrument in one document. But let's say you wanted to make a jam session sheet that multiple people were going to use with playing multiple instruments. You could create, C, F, and G7 in ukulele. We could create a C. I could go here and go, all right, let's set the guitar. That took a second. Then we go F. And we're going to save that chord. And then we're going to go to G. And that's a popular one. Save that chord. So now if I close that, now we have C, F, and G for guitar chords. Oh wait, hold on, let's delete that line. Yes, delete that line. Go to the chord finder. My bad. I wanted guitar, standard tuning, G, and that took a second. Dominant seventh. Okay. That's the chord I wanted. So now I have the same. So that's an example of how you can use chords. You can use these move up and move down arrows to move these lines and reorganize them however you see fit. So let me save that. You can use it for new comments. You can also, we have a button here called toggle comment, and essentially the way a comment works in programming is a comment is ignored by the program. It's just there for our own benefit. So you could, if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to export these and you go, no, I forgot, I don't want to export, I just want to do the ukulele ones right now. You could go in here and say, hey, toggle comment. And what it's going to do is, if you notice, the comment lines here have this little hashtag or pound symbol or number symbol in front of them. That's to tell Cordius that they're ignored, like whatever text comes after is whatever. If I do toggle comment, I've selected this C chord and I do toggle comment, you can see the preview disappears and we get a little pound sign added in front. So it's a quick way to basically disable lines. So you can say, hey, I want to disable these because when I save, I want to make sure when I export these, I don't want to export the guitar ones right now. I just want to do the ukulele ones. So for whatever reason, or if you have a diagram that's not ready yet, or you have a diagram that for some reason the style is coming out ugly and you want to work on it. So that's one option for disabling things temporarily. I could also, for example, go up here to our style line, and if I do toggle comment there, now you'll notice we're back to the default style. So toggle comment, we can essentially enable or disable styles. What that means is, if I go in here and create a new style line or a new options line, I keep calling them style lines because eventually I'm going to change their name because chord options is not very intuitive. Let's say I went in here and I changed the font to that. I made it italic. And let's say I gave, let's do the bars now. So I'm going to set bars to be arcs. Okay. So I have a new style. Again, it's at the bottom, so it's not going to change anything. I want to move it up to the top. Now you'll see that the C is italic, and if you look, here's a little bar line. So what Cordius has done here is it's determined that this is where you're going to want to bar on this chord. That's what that automatic barring is when you're in the chord finder here, and it has auto add bars. When we picked that, the diagram remembered that you wanted to automatically add bars if the style allowed it. So the style, we've turned on bars, and there they are. It's right where it should be. On the F, let's see. Nope, there's nowhere to bar on that diagram. G7, yeah, you could bar right there. Okay, so let's say you want to like that's the style there. If we look here, we have C, F, and G7. All right. Say we switch the order here. So remember, we disabled that other style, the Comic Sans. Let me go ahead and move it down. If you look, nothing's changed. And the reason that nothing has changed is because, again, we still have this one Comic Sans. It's commented. It's been disabled. So if I go ahead and toggle comment, I can turn that back on. And now, of course, we're back to our CF and G7s that we made earlier. So remember, whatever one is last applied, that's the one that we're reading from top to bottom, that's the one that's going to appear. It's going to be used. Now, why bother having two different styles? Well, maybe you want to create a list of all your favorite chords, and you want to apply one style for one book, and a different style for your song sheets, and another style for your jam session sheets. This lets you use one document with all of your chords listed out, and you can just put a bunch of different styles at the top and just turn off the ones you don't want to use. The other option that you can do is, because it's whichever one is seen last, let's say, for example, in the current example, like I like the way CF and G looks with this font, but I really don't like the way it shows up. Like, these are way too close together. It looks too ugly, I think, for guitar chords. So I really don't want the same style, the same shape for ukulele and guitar. Well, what I can do is, if I move this down here, this was our italic looking one with the bar chords. Now, I'll go ahead and move that on top, why not? So we look over here. Now we have Comic Sans, that style is applying to the ukulele chords, and now we have a style change, and now this is being applied to guitar chords. So we could then go here and edit this style. We can make the chord diagram and say look better for, maybe we decide that for guitar, because we have so many things going on here, we want, say, you know, slightly bigger than and a different font. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a different font here. Gentium subs. Good. Regular. Okay. Now, there we go. Not great looking, but again, you can change it to however you want. You can play around with the styles until you find one that works for you. And that one line will be used for all the chords beneath it. So you can see that our ukulele ones still have this style up here, and our guitar ones are using this style, which I might want to, let's say I made the font size 64. That will probably help. There we go. Those look a little bit nicer. The last thing I'll say about the styles is, so we have this option of, if we look at a diagram here, by default, it's going to try to find, Cordius is going to try to find where to draw the bar lines. Let's say you go, you know what? I really don't want that bar there. For just this one chord. Not in the style, but just this one chord. I don't want the bar. You can go here and change that bar line. So changing it to 0 means there's going to be no bar line whatsoever. Adding to the number, as you can see, you can change where the bar line is. And you might say, oh, that looks kind of weird. Why is it only going that far? If you run into a problem like this, what you can do is go back to your style and say, yes, I'm going to save the changes. Edit the line of the options and do force full bars. What that will do is it will force the bar to go all the way across the fretboard. So now, when we look at that F, you could say, oh, well, that's not right at all. Like, that doesn't work because we don't want a bar across here. This is supposed to be an open string, right? So I could turn it off. So even though it's going to try to even though it's going to try to draw bars, by turning that to 0, you're going to make sure that doesn't appear there. Let's say another example. Well, let's go up here to our ukulele style that we created. And let's say I put the bars there as a straight line. Okay. Now when we come here, look, that little C, that we have a bar there now that wasn't there before. And if we wanted to go all the way across, we can edit the line and do force full bars. Now when we go to the C, hey look, it has a line going straight across C, F, G. As you can see, the default, the automatic, it's not going to draw a line here. But if we wanted to put one somewhere, oh, that's the bass line, we can change the bar line and add one wherever we want it. So, really, what this gives you is, let's say I copy this G7, which I don't want that bar there, right? Because that looks dumb. The bar line shouldn't go all the way across. But what I could do, let me save that. Let me make that the default. Yes. Create a new chord. So it's going to create a new G7, and you can see it's using, because it's at the bottom of the list, it's going to use that guitar style. I can go ahead and move it up until I get it back up with the ukulele chords and the ukulele style. And I could say, you know what? Another G7 is right here. And if that's a G7, I can go ahead and add that bar line back. So, that's just a few examples of how the bar line stuff works. I personally don't like having the bar lines at all, so that's just my own personal preference. Save the changes. One thing you notice, like now, for example, I have a couple G7 chords here. I'm going to want to make sure to rename, maybe I'll do this G7, with bar. Okay, so that way I have two separate ones here, and then they're going to have different file names. So when I go export as SVG, and I save it to that folder, if we go back and look at our folder really quickly, there we go. Here's our G7 SVG. And here's our G7 with the bar. Come on. So, there we have it. Make sure they have different file names, so we got two separate files. So, that's basically it. Again, the point of this program is to help people who need to make a bunch of diagrams for educational purposes of their own use or whatever. If you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email. My contact information is at the Cordius.com website. The link's in the description. And oh, one last thing. Obviously, since I saved this document, of course, and I do new, and I have a new blank one, I can always reopen that text document and get back all the chords that I had before. So you can use that as a way of saving up all of your favorite chords and building up huge files. I have a bunch of giant files of lists of chords for different instruments and different tunings. So, okay, that's basically it. This was Cordius 1.0. I know it's a little confusing with these styles and the orders and stuff, but once you get the hang of it, really you don't need to change it that much. The style's the same, and you're basically going to have fun just adding more and more chords, diagrams you want to use, and tweak the style, once you found the style that you like very infrequently. But I'm also looking for any feedback on the program. I plan on releasing a 2.0. I want 2.0 to be way easier to use. I don't want to have to, create as long of a tutorial to explain how it works. And so if you have any suggestions or any ideas for things that you want the diagrams to support, as you can see, I have some things. Some of these are user suggestions, like having the circle above there, or having the ability to have bar lines that didn't reach all the way across was another user suggestion. So turning off the full bars. So that's it for Cordius. You can check it out at cordius.com/download, and it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X.